Thank you, Hugh, for that kind introduction, and thank you for that very warm reception just now. Can I thank everyone I've met for the warm welcome I've received in Austin, or as an Austinite said to me last night, the People's Republic of Austin. You hear good things about Texas back home, and indeed Austin has been full of good things. There's the famous expression, everything's bigger in Texas. And from what I've seen over the last couple of days, this turns out to be true, apart from me, obviously. But to be honest, the thing that surprised me the most is the number of hipsters I've encountered. Wow! I'm starting to feel a bit left out without a beard. But seriously, it's a real honour to be back in the US and a real privilege to be following in the footsteps of some truly inspirational people at this prestigious conference. Unfortunately, due to the time difference, the sun has already set back home in London. But one upshot of giving this speech now is the sun hasn't set in Washington, D.C. yet. This hopefully means no late night tweets attacking me during the course of this speech. Let's see. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'd like to talk today about one of our biggest shared challenges, a challenge facing Britain, America, and countries and cities across Europe in equal measure. And that's ensuring that the advancement of technology is for the benefit of everyone in society. In the US, the UK, and other countries around the world, we're experiencing a period of historic change and uncertainty. This is affecting our politics, our economies, and our societies. I make this speech today at a time when back home in Britain, we're still reeling from the outcome of the referendum to leave the European Union. Sadly, we're only preparing for the economic storm Brexit could bring, but dealing with something far deeper, something that has been bubbling under the surface for many years, but has only been truly exposed more recently. And that's the increasing disconnect and disillusionment of many communities across Britain, from our politics, from our economy, and our shared way of life. The truth is that many of those who voted to leave the EU did so because of a deep sense of unease about globalisation, about the modern world and pace of change, and about the inequality they experience. London is one of the most diverse cities in the world, with more than 300 languages spoken and with young and old living cheek by jowl. This is one of our greatest strengths. But as a nation, we're becoming increasingly polarised, with the politics of blame and hatred seeping deeper into our national debates. Here in the US and in countries across Europe, there have been similar expressions of unease, fear, and anger. And this is evident in the rise in nativism and populism, and in a divisive form of political discourse becoming the norm. Just look at the latest elections in Italy last week. Of course, there are multiple reasons for this trend, and the honest truth is we don't yet have all the answers. But there are some undeniable common threads. Growing groups of people who feel increasingly left behind by deindustrialization and globalization. And the way technology has, and still is, profoundly changing our economies and our way of life. The dominant characteristic is the unprecedented scale and speed of change, especially change driven by technology. We see it all around us. Technology is disrupting and shifting the way we do everything. The nature of our economies and the types of jobs available, where we live and how we travel, the way we consume news and process information, and vitally, the way we communicate and interact with one another. How we deal with this transformation will be a defining challenge of the 21st century, because it cuts across so many layers of our society, politics, economics, and the general well-being of modern citizens. The question now is not only how we utilize this new technology for the benefit of everyone in our society, how we use it to reduce inequality and to maintain decent employment rights. Just as significant is how we prevent harm to the social cohesion of our communities and how we interact with one another. With these types of profound questions, we rely on the principled judgments made by the innovators themselves. But the public also has a right to be heard and a right to expect democratic leaders to guide them along this delicate path. And this is something I believe has been absent in recent years. We've been through major technology revolutions before. Overall, we've come out stronger and more prosperous. These advances have brought us some of humanity's greatest accomplishments. The first industrial revolution, born in Britain, not only changed my country, but the rest of the world. We had the rise of the middle class for the first time, and the innovations that were developed, such as the steam train and new machinery, contributed to the advancement of agriculture, industry, and trade. But it also led to unrest and protests from the Luddites who feared for their textile jobs, and to an era of greater pollution, child labour, and unsafe working conditions before the advent of trade unions and proper employment laws. All revolutions are by their very nature disruptive, but this fourth industrial revolution that we're going through now is different. It's different to those that came before, with far greater risks. We're now in a new era where exponential change can happen and spread across the world faster than ever before. And just as many have felt marginalized by shifts away from manufacturing and blue-collar industries, for today's workers, there's a fear that new technology is bypassing the skills they've spent their lifetime developing, and the social contract struck by the post-war generation on employment rights, rights that were hard-won and decades in the making. If managed poorly, and if tech sectors are tempted to reap the rewards of their innovations without a care for their wider impact, I fear all this change risks an age of unprecedented inequality and division that could undermine the pillars and key institutions of our society. Take social media. A handful of the largest global tech companies have managed to amass an enormous amount of power over how information is consumed. Platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have brought huge benefits to society. They've made it easier for us to stay in touch with those we love, meet like-minded people, and have easier access to information we want. And they've enabled talented people to share their creativity directly with the world. But understandably, there are growing concerns about the way some of the biggest companies on the planet are impacting our lives and the overall well-being of our societies. In some cases, these new platforms have been used to exacerbate, fuel, and deepen the divisions within our communities. The impact is and continues to be profound and should worry democracies around the world. We've already seen evidence of elections and referendums being influenced, a rise in online abuse, misogyny, and religious hatred, fake news spreading misinformation, algorithms blinkering us from different points of view and pushing people to extremes, and terrorists and far-right groups using social media to not only conspire but to radicalize and brainwash others. All of this is dividing and polarizing us rather than uniting us. I know all this too well from personal experience. I receive loads of stuff on Twitter and Facebook on a daily basis. I want to share with you today just half a dozen of the types of tweets that I receive. @Mem-Usay tweeted, "Deport all Muslims and make London white again. All problems will be gone." @Warpreva tweeted, "Sadiq Khan is just a gay Muzzy terrorist." @Emmanuel_Maris tweeted, "Muslims have no dignity. I wish Sadiq Khan would blow himself up like they all do. He might get his 12 virgins." @BillWall69 tweeted, "I say, kill the Mayor of London and you will be rid of one Muslim terrorist." @Latino_Amante tweeted, "Treason is still a crime punishable by death in this country. Your name will be at the top of that list." @Speedwagon PRST tweeted, "I'd pay for someone to execute Sadiq Khan." Now, I could go on, but I won't. I don't read this out to be portrayed as a victim or to ask for sympathy. But ask yourself this: what happens when young boys and girls from minority backgrounds see this kind of thing on their timelines, or experience it themselves, or someone thinking about becoming a politician? And what about girls and women who are being driven from these platforms, reversing our long fight for gender equality? We simply must do more to protect people online. Social media platforms already have a legal obligation to remove content that breaks local laws. But this isn't always happening or happening quickly enough. Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms are finally starting to react to the criticisms and are developing technology to make sure the reporting process becomes quicker and more effective, and I welcome this. But with the skills and resources these companies have at their disposal, I believe it's possible to go further and faster. What we need to see is a stronger duty of care so that social media platforms can live up to their promises to be places that connect, unify, and democratize the sharing of information, and be places where everyone feels welcome and valued. If this doesn't happen, then more countries will start to follow or go further than what Germany has done. The German government have changed the law so that social media companies face hefty fines if they fail to quickly remove hate speech, fake news, and illegal material. Another example of the opportunities and risks ahead is the growing gig economy. While the social media revolution has changed the way we create, share, and consume creative content, peer-to-peer platforms are changing the way people monetize their skills and time. This has the potential to fundamentally impact the way we view employment. At its best, the sharing economy can make it easier for people to sell their skills, their time, and even their home in a way that suits them at a fair price. But at its worst, it can drive down pay, workers' rights, and safety standards. If the sharing economy is real, it should be as liberating for the worker or supplier as it is for the consumer. Yes, innovative new companies are providing fantastic services to people around the world and have created tens of thousands of new jobs in the process. But without prudent regulation and oversight, this new way of doing business risks being used as cover to break up decades of established and hard-fought rights. We must now ask whether it's acceptable for platforms in the quick pursuit for market share to be allowed to set a price which is too low to adequately reward workers, while at the same time incentivizing people to work just like full-time employees. Companies that behave in this way are not genuine peer-to-peer platforms, they're simply companies, service providers or retailers with an app. There's nothing wrong with this, but we can't confuse matters by thinking that because a business is smart, disruptive, popular even, and has a really neat app, it somehow has a right to behave in a different regulatory status to its competitors. Ultimately, there must be greater responsibility taken by some tech companies for the impact they're having on the world. And crucially, no business or industry should ever consider itself above the local rules or laws set by democratic processes. In London, we've been clear with Uber and other companies that everyone, no matter how big, must play by the rules, no exceptions. Now, I appreciate that some of these companies can afford to spend a fortune on an array of lawyers and PR experts, and they do. However, in the long run, attempts to subvert, bypass, or turn the public against proper regulation doesn't do anyone any favours. But I want to be clear, the onus for change should not just be on tech companies and innovators. One of the biggest problems over the last few years is that politicians and governments have just been passive, sitting on their hands, while the tech revolution has happened around them. There's been a failure to ensure that our economies and our regulatory structures are prepared and relevant. It must ultimately fall to government, working with tech businesses and leaders to ensure that this revolution is not detrimental to our long-term process and progress. Put simply, there's been a dereliction of duty on the part of politicians and policymakers to ensure that the rapid growth in technology is utilised and steered in a direction that benefits us all. Perhaps we all place too much faith in the stated intentions and vision of the tech pioneers, the vision of great openness, inclusivity and morality to create something that benefits everyone. But as things have progressed, we must now ask ourselves, how can we ensure that technology always helps and never hinders our aim to create more open, connected, socially integrated societies? You know, our economies have always needed new regulations in place to meet the needs of workers and consumers when the environment changes. Evolving economies must mean evolving regulation, and today is no different. Rather than blaming companies for innovating ahead of regulation, politicians must fix things when the regulation is out of date. The question now for governments or traditional sectors should not be how to slow down innovation in its tracks, because we can't and we shouldn't. It should be how we mitigate against the potentially negative impacts of disruption. And more than that, how can we harness the very same technologies to drive up standards and to create more just and equal societies? You know, it was the great US President, JFK, who said in 1960, "The new frontiers will present us with both dangers and opportunities. Our task is to overcome those dangers and seize those opportunities." In my view, it's now our generation's turn to step up with solutions that match the scale of the challenge today. One of the key differences with this tech revolution is the role cities can and should play. The world's growing population is increasingly concentrated in our cities, a trend that is only accelerating. And cities are linking together to form the nervous system of our global economy. In this fast-paced change, city government can cope better with digital disruption, turning technological upheavals to our advantage. This is my ambition as the Mayor of London, and I encourage other mayors and great cities to join me in this mission. In London, we're harnessing the power of new technology to transform lives. We're aiming to make London a global byword for smart cities with data, connectivity and innovation supporting our infrastructure and services. We're getting much more involved in using tech to provide public services to the citizens we represent. We're exploring what responsible technology means, what we can do from City Hall, and how we can encourage people and companies based in our city to behave in positive ways. We're utilising data to transform the way public services are delivered, making them more accessible, efficient and responsive. We're looking at London's strengths in AI and automation, finding the best ways to take advantage of the opportunities it could bring, whilst also investing in education to ensure Londoners have the digital skills they need for the jobs of tomorrow. We've set up an online hate crime hub, the first of its kind in Europe, to work with social media companies. We're setting up public competition to fund London innovation towards solving some of the big social challenges that we face. And crucially, we're breaking down the barriers that still exist for girls and women to reach their potential, not only in the tech sector, but in every part of our society. You know, 2018 is a pivotal year for London as we mark the centenary of women winning the right to vote in the UK. And as a proud feminist, I've launched a campaign, Behind Every Great City. This campaign is about celebrating how far we've come, celebrating how it's the achievements and contributions of women from all walks of life that make cities like London so great, and understanding and championing the fact that behind every great city is equality, opportunity, and progress. But we're also using this moment to acknowledge how far we still have to go for full gender equality. My ambition is to make London the most inclusive city in the world, a place where everyone, no matter their gender, background, race, or religion, has the opportunities to get on in life. An example is the work we're doing with my new digital skills programme. This new initiative aims to arm young Londoners, particularly women and those from minority communities, with the skills they need to access the jobs of the future. And my message today to other cities and to global tech leaders is that collectively we must do more to champion greater inclusivity within the tech community. It's not only the right thing to do, evidence shows it's good for our economies too. Everyone should be able to benefit from the fruits of this tech revolution. So our job is not just to ensure the next generation has the skills and infrastructure needed to succeed, but also to reskill and support those who will inevitably lose out as part of this digital revolution. It may not be as exciting, but we have a duty of care to care about the impact of the transition as well as the end goal. You know, we've seen in both our countries' histories the pain and devastation that can come when there is a failure to intervene in order to prevent economic dislocation, leaving whole communities suffering for decades. Margaret Thatcher is one of a handful of British prime ministers who became well known and respected in the US. But back in the UK, she remains a controversial, divisive figure in some parts of the country to this day. And let me tell you why. Her government is blamed by millions of people in swathes of my country for ruining their communities. Whether it was coal or steel, she oversaw the closure of once thriving industries that predominantly working class communities not only relied upon for their living, but for their way of life. Clearly, the viability of these industries was changing. But what was wrong was how these communities were just left high and dry when their jobs and the jobs for their children and grandchildren were just taken away. And no new training provided. No action from the government to replace old industries with a new source of jobs and growth. And no support or a helping hand to find new work. And the impact is still being felt today. Generational unemployment, urban decay, a rise in mental health issues, a loss of hope, and too many people now searching to find someone other to blame for their own frustrations and unhappiness. I understand it's a similar story in the industrial towns across America's so-called Rust Belt. We must ensure this kind of transition through an industrial revolution never happens again, because it not only hurts our economy as a whole, but leaves an enduring scar on our society, more bitterness, hatred, and division. So let me finish with this. We've seen in both our countries that when people feel left behind, the door is left open for some individuals to take advantage, to play on people's fears by blaming others, to sow the seeds of division, to overpromise a return to jobs and industry of the past. But this road only leads to more bitterness, hatred, and suffering of the most disadvantaged. The only way we can counteract the rise in negative populism is to counteract the drivers making people feel left behind in the first place. This is about ensuring that everyone can benefit from the fruits of globalization and that we have fair, inclusive economies. The route to achieving this goal is to embrace the advancement of tech and proactively shape the future relationship between technology and society for the benefit of everyone, from social media and the gig economy to automation and AI. The technology we have can't be uninvented. We must move forward and make the most of our times, and we must strive to take advantage of our growing ability to mould the future at a local, city level. Our societies and global communities, which are becoming even more connected and interdependent, will be moulded in the crucible of this fourth industrial revolution. We shouldn't see this through the prism of a threat to jobs and our social fabric. We should see the true threat as the failure of tech companies to appreciate the responsibility they have to wider society and the failure of policymakers to adapt. Ladies and gentlemen, the good news is that we're only just at the beginning of this journey. And if the companies and politicians at all levels of government can work together to shape the future of tech, then I remain optimistic that we can utilise technology to create fairer, more united cities and countries, and optimistic that we can work together to instil hope for a better, more inclusive future for us all. Thank you very much.